This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
Well, since taking office, the Trump administration has quickly reshaped the U.S. government, scaling back civil rights protections and dismantling DEI initiatives. This week, the administration began major cuts to the Department of Education, including budgets, staffing, and offices. It's a reduction of resources where some protect marginalized students all across the United States. For Black communities, these changes are especially concerning as the fight for equal education has been a long struggle, and many worry weakened federal support could widen existing gaps. So what could these cuts and the White House's ultimate end goal of dismantling the Department of Education mean for Black students, their education, and their futures? Well, joining us now is the former director of the University of Chicago Charter Schools, nationally recognized educator and founder of More Math Geniuses, Dr. Assata Moore. Thank you so much for joining us on set. It's
Thanks
great
for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. So when we talk about these cuts happening to the Department of Education, specifically when we talk about civil rights and Title I programs, what impact are those cuts having in your view?
Well, first, I think it's a great question for everyone to think about. And we should think about it from the standpoint of it being long-term. 80% of schools in this country will be impacted because 80% of schools are receiving these Title I resources, the IDEA Act, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so what we're looking at, if we were to look at Louisiana, 12% of those teachers are funded by Title I funds. What will happen with a 12% reduction in staff for classrooms that are already overoccupied? When you look at states like Tennessee, Mississippi, West Virginia, those states, anywhere from 25 to 50% in the case of West Virginia, rely on funds from Title I, from the Department of Education. And so really, it's not even a question about just Black students, although they're often the ones that are more heavily impacted, but this is really about all students and the future of this country and what we want it to look like.
What do you say to those who push back and say, you know, these programs like Title I and DEI initiatives aren't necessary, they're not effective?
Well, if you have a student with disabilities and they need a ramp to get their wheelchair, I think that's kind of important. I was at a school on the south side of Chicago where they had to put elevators in the building to give all students access. When we talk about DEI, I think it's important to actually say the words. Are we saying that we do not want diversity? Are we saying that we do not want equity? Are we saying that we do not want all children to be included in education? The idea of Title I is all students having high quality education. And then I would say, look at the data. The data says since these acts, if we look at the Every Student Succeed Act from 2015, and look at what happened with the data there, the gap has been narrowing. So yes, there's always work. My checkbook needs some work, right? I can identify where there's some waste. So that's not a bad thing to identify waste. I would look kind of hesitantly to say fraud, because most educators don't want to go to jail.
Right.
So it's not a lot of fraud. So I think that the impact will be huge. And these are sources that, based on the data, says that A, we need them, and B, that they have been working. And yes, we can improve.
So there's, of course, critics on the other side, and I wish we had more time, but we've got about a minute left. What would you suggest, Doctor, would be the best way to ensure that all students have a fair shake and a fair shot at success?
I really don't care what you call it, but I think we have to look at the data and say, in certain communities, and not just Black communities, in certain communities, the local and state level economic pot is not there to support education. West Virginia, 50% from federal funds. Virginia, 20%. That is a difference that's not just about Black students. And we want all of our children in this country to be able to do well so that we can prepare the next leaders of the future that are literate both in mathematics and in reading.
Well, I think that's certainly a message we can all unite around. How we get there, multifaceted, but I certainly appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.